GRE Learning World, The First Blossom, Chapter 1 Review. Before sunrise, most of Bellwether Orchard lay dormant, its dark branches waiting quietly for spring. But Pip discovered a nascent pink blossom on one tree and rang the orchard bell.
Dormant.
Dormant.
Dormant dormant, adjective, inactive now but capable of becoming active later. The orchard remained dormant through the coldest weeks. Contrast, active, operating or developing now.
The dark branches are dormant, but they are still alive and able to wake in spring.
Nascent.
Nascent.
Nascent nascent, adjective, just beginning to exist or develop. Pip shielded the nascent blossom from the wind. Contrast, mature, fully developed.
Against the sleeping orchard, one nascent blossom marks the very beginning of growth. Clover feared the whole orchard had awakened. Fern cautioned that this conclusion was premature. One flower was unusual, but it was not yet a disaster.
Premature.
Premature.
Premature, adjective, happening before the proper or expected time. Declaring a crisis after one blossom would be premature. Contrast, timely, happening at an appropriate moment.
Clover pauses before pulling the spring lever because the evidence is not sufficient yet. Professor Hoot compared the branch with the surrounding trees and called the bloom anomalous, different from the expected winter pattern.
Anomalous.
Anomalous.
Anomalous, anomals, adjective, different from what is normal or expected. One warm reading looked anomalous beside 6 cold readings. Contrast, typical, consistent with the usual pattern.
Professor Hoot isolates the odd measurement instead of treating it as the new normal. The team decided to investigate instead of guessing. Fern checked the heating pipes and weather ledger while Professor Hoot examined the bud. Pip used a narrow sensor to probe the soil beneath the roots.
Investigate.
Investigate.
Investigate, verb, examine systematically in order to discover the facts. The team investigated the bloom by checking records and equipment. Contrast, assume, accept something without checking the evidence.
They gather several kinds of evidence because a real investigation is systematic.
Probe.
Probe.
Probe, verb, examine something closely to uncover more information. Pip used a sensor to probe the soil beneath the roots. Contrast, glance at, look briefly without close examination.
The slender sensor reaches below the surface to find information that a quick look cannot reveal. Their evidence helped them diagnose the problem. A faulty clock had warmed one irrigation pipe 2 weeks early. Villagers began to speculate about a mysterious false spring, but Clover reminded them that a theory was not proof.
Diagnose.
Diagnose.
Diagnose, verb, identify the nature or cause of a problem. The team diagnosed a faulty timer in the irrigation system. Contrast, detect, notice a problem without necessarily identifying its cause.
Finding the warm pipe detects the symptom. Tracing it to the faulty timer diagnoses the cause.
Speculate.
Speculate.
Speculate, verb, form a theory without enough evidence for certainty. Villagers speculated about a false spring before seeing the records. Contrast, verify, establish that something is true with evidence.
The villagers' imaginative ideas may be possible, but they remain speculation until evidence supports them. The night forecast predicted frost. The team anticipated the danger by building a light insulated canopy around the branch before the temperature fell.
Anticipate.
Anticipate.
Anticipate, verb, expect something and prepare for it in advance. The team anticipated frost and covered the branch before sunset. Contrast, react, respond only after something has happened.
They act before the frost arrives, turning a forecast into useful preparation. When frost silvered the orchard, their preparation helped avert damage. The single blossom survived, and the rest of the orchard continued sleeping.
Avert.
Avert.
Avert, avert, verb, prevent a harmful event from happening. The insulated canopy helped avert damage to the blossom. Contrast, remedy, correct harm after it has occurred.
Because the blossom remains unharmed, the team has averted damage rather than repaired it afterward.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Dormant, nascent, premature, anomalous, investigate, probe, diagnose, speculate, anticipate, avert.
GRE Learning World, The Weather Ledger, Chapter 2 Review. The morning after the blossom survived, a copper-red cloud band appeared above Bellwether Orchard. Clover called it a harbinger of rough weather. In the weather ledger, Professor Hoot found an earlier voltage dip, the same precursor that had come before every false warm reading.
Harbinger.
Harbinger.
Harbinger, harbinger, noun, a sign that something, often a major change, is approaching. The copper-red clouds were a harbinger of rough weather. Contrast, aftermath, consequences that remain after an event.
The cloud band is a harbinger because it signals a larger change that is still approaching.
Precursor.
Precursor.
Precursor, precursor, noun, an earlier event or condition that leads to a later one. A brief voltage dip was the precursor to every false warm reading. Contrast, result, something produced by an earlier cause.
The voltage dip is a precursor because it happens first and leads into the later error. Pip climbed the weather tower and watched its blue signal lamp blink, go dark, and return. The power was intermittent, stopping and starting instead of flowing steadily.
Intermittent.
Intermittent.
Intermittent, intermittent, adjective, stopping and starting repeatedly rather than continuing steadily. Intermittent power made the tower lamp blink on and off. Contrast, continuous, proceeding without interruption.
The lamp repeatedly loses and regains power, so the supply is intermittent rather than continuous. Meanwhile, the helper robots brought sporadic reports from scattered corners of the orchard. One warm patch near the wall, another beside the stream, then a long silence. The reports appeared irregularly, with no steady rhythm.
Sporadic.
Sporadic.
Sporadic, sporadic, adjective, occurring only occasionally and at irregular, scattered times. Sporadic warm soil reports came from scattered parts of the orchard. Contrast, systematic, occurring according to a consistent pattern.
The reports are sporadic because they appear occasionally, irregularly, and in separate places. Fern aligned the ledger pages and located the onset of each warming episode. It began just after damp wind shook the bell cable. Inside the control box, a drop of water bridged two contacts and could trigger the orchard's heating routine.
Onset.
Onset.
Onset, onset, noun, the beginning of an event, condition, or process. The ledger placed the onset of each warming episode after the bell cable moved. Contrast, cessation, the point at which something stops.
The onset is the exact beginning of the warming episode, not its cause or its ending.
Trigger.
Trigger.
Trigger, verb, cause an event or process to begin. A water droplet could trigger the orchard's heating routine. Contrast, inhibit, restrain, or prevent a process from beginning.
The droplet acts as the trigger because it causes the heating sequence to begin. Professor Hoot checked the falling pressure and the fast darkening sky. A sleet storm was imminent, not merely possible, but likely to arrive very soon.
Imminent.
Imminent.
Imminent, imminent, adjective, likely to happen very soon. The falling pressure showed that a sleet storm was imminent. Contrast, remote, unlikely to happen soon.
The storm front is already close, so the danger is imminent rather than merely possible someday. If the false signal restored full heat, it would accelerate the buds' growth and leave them exposed to ice. Fern therefore curtailed the heating network, limiting it to the nursery and the protected blossom while the team repaired the fault.
Accelerate.
Accelerate.
Accelerate, accelerate. Verb, make a process happen or develop more quickly. Unnecessary heat would accelerate the bud's growth. Contrast, decelerate, reduce speed or slow a process.
Extra warmth would make growth proceed faster than the season safely allows.
Curtail.
Curtail.
Curtail, verb, reduce or limit something before its normal extent is reached. Fern curtailed heating while the crew repaired the control box. Contrast, extend, allow something to continue or reach farther.
She does not stop every heater. She curtails the network by deliberately limiting its range. Before the first sleet struck, Pip dried the contacts, Fern sealed the control box, and the helper robots anchored an insulated cover. Their advance work forestalled another false spring signal, and the orchard stayed safely asleep through the storm.
Forestall.
Forestall.
Forestall, verb, act in advance to prevent or delay an expected problem. Sealing the control box would forestall another false spring signal. Contrast, respond, act after a problem has already appeared.
The crew acts before the sleet arrives, so they forestall the failure instead of responding afterward.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Harbinger, precursor, intermittent, sporadic, onset, trigger, imminent, accelerate, curtail, forestall.
GRE Learning World, The Pattern Beneath the Noise, Chapter 3 Review. The storm passed, but the row beside the weather station still made Pip uneasy. Its heat readings continued to fluctuate, rising and falling through the morning instead of settling down. Worse, each time Fern tested the irrigation valve, the chart showed an abrupt spike that broke the pattern without warning.
Fluctuate.
Fluctuate.
Fluctuate, verb, rise and fall irregularly in level, amount, or strength. The cable temperature fluctuated throughout the night instead of climbing steadily. Contrast, remain stable, stay at roughly the same level.
The readings fluctuate because they rise and fall again and again, rather than moving in one steady direction.
Abrupt.
Abrupt.
Abrupt, abrupt, adjective, sudden and unexpected, often with little warning. An abrupt spike in the log appeared each time the irrigation valve opened. Contrast, gradual, developing slowly through small stages.
The spike is abrupt because it arrives suddenly and sharply, instead of building little by little. Professor Hoot refused to judge the problem from one dramatic chart. He asked Clover and the helper robots to accumulate readings from every sensor row, every valve, and every hour until the whole orchard map began to speak clearly.
Accumulate.
Accumulate.
Accumulate, verb, gather or increase gradually over time. The owl accumulated readings from every sensor before judging the pattern. Contrast, disperse, spread out, or cause a collection to break apart.
Professor Hoot accumulates evidence by gathering more and more readings into one useful set. When Fern compared the rows, the warm strip did not look dangerous at first glance. Each increase was only a tiny increment of heat, almost too small to notice. Yet the tiny additions kept arriving, one after another, like quiet footsteps on a stair.
Increment.
Increment.
Increment, crumunt, noun, a small amount added during one stage of growth or change. Each tiny increment of heat seemed harmless when viewed by itself. Contrast, decrement, a small reduction in an amount or value.
An increment is one small added step, so each separate rise matters even if it looks minor alone. By afternoon, most of the orchard cooled again. Only one narrow row held sustained warmth long after the pump switched off. The persistence of that warm patch convinced the team they were tracing a real physical problem, not a passing sensor mistake.
Sustained.
Sustained.
Sustained, sustind, adjective, continuing at a consistent level for a substantial period. Only one row of trees showed sustained warmth after the pump switched off. Contrast, fleeting, lasting for only a very short time.
The warmth is sustained because it continues at a steady level instead of disappearing right away.
Persistence.
Persistence.
Persistence, persistuns. Noun, the fact of continuing despite time, resistance, or interruption. The persistence of the warm patch ruled out a momentary sensor error. Contrast, cessation, the complete stopping of an activity or condition.
Its persistence means the warm patch keeps existing despite the pump stopping and the storm ending. Then Clover noticed why the problem kept stretching farther than expected. A sleepy alarm rotor had missed the first warning, and that delay compounded the heating fault by giving the hidden warmth more time to travel beneath the roots.
Compound.
Compound.
Compound, verb, make a problem worse by adding another difficulty or effect. A delayed alarm compounded the heating fault by letting it continue unnoticed. Contrast, alleviate, make a problem or burden less severe.
The delay compounds the fault because it adds another difficulty and makes the original problem worse. Fern knelt by the soil and pressed it between her paws. The ground near the leaking pipe was soaked, and that moisture could amplify the cable's warmth as it spread outward. So Pip and the helper robots carried dry mulch and felt padding to dampen the heat before it reached the next roots.
Amplify.
Amplify.
Amplify, verb, increase the strength, size, or effect of something. Moist soil amplified the cable's heat and carried it toward the tree roots. Contrast, attenuate, reduce the force, intensity, or effect of something.
Wet ground amplifies the warmth because it makes the effect stronger as the heat travels outward.
Dampen.
Dampen.
Dampen, verb, make an effect, movement, or feeling less strong. A layer of dry mulch could dampen the spread of heat through the wet ground. Contrast, intensify, become, or make something stronger.
The dry barrier dampens the heat by making its effect weaker before it reaches the roots. At last, Fern isolated the damaged line, and Pip watched the chart once more. The wavering heat no longer climbed. Minute by minute, the orange trace began to subside until the orchard returned to the calm winter hush it had been missing.
Subside.
Subside.
Subside, sub-syd, verb, become less intense, severe, or active. After the power line was isolated, the unusual warmth began to subside. Contrast, escalate, increase rapidly in intensity or seriousness.
The warmth subsides because it gradually becomes less intense after the damaged line is cut off.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Fluctuate, abrupt, accumulate, increment, sustained, persistence, compound, amplify, dampen, subside.
GRE Learning World, Holding the Frost Line, Chapter 4 Review. Before dusk, Professor Hoot saw the frost line sliding down the hill faster than expected. Fern decided to intervene at once instead of waiting for the night to answer for them. While Clover warned the nearest growers, Pip isolated the still suspect heating loop from the rest of the orchard so no hidden pulse could spread farther.
Intervene.
Intervene.
Intervene, verb, take action to change an event or prevent an unwanted outcome. Fern chose to intervene before the fast-moving frost could surprise the orchard. Contrast, stand aside, choose not to become involved.
She intervenes by stepping into the problem early and changing what will happen next.
Isolate.
Isolate.
Isolate, verb, separate something from other things to prevent spread or identify a cause. Pip isolated the suspect heating loop from the rest of the network. Contrast, integrate, connect apart with a larger system.
The loop is isolated because it is separated from the wider system, so its effect cannot spread. The heat had not vanished entirely. It still crept beneath one service row near the stone wall. Fern and the helper robots dug narrow gaps and set copper clamps to contain the warmth inside that empty strip, keeping it away from the sleeping roots beside it.
Contain.
Contain.
Contain, verb, prevent a problem, danger, or substance from spreading. Copper clamps help the team contain the warmth inside one empty row. Contrast, release, allow something confined to escape or spread.
They contain the heat by keeping it inside a boundary, instead of letting it move outward. A few branch tips had already begun to swell again. Professor Hoot mixed a gentle cooling mist, and Clover stretched pale screens over the row to inhibit any further bud growth until the night danger passed.
Inhibit.
Inhibit.
Inhibit, inhibit, verb, slow, limit, or prevent a process or activity. Cool mist and pale screens inhibited the buds from opening further. Contrast, promote, encourage a process to develop.
The screens inhibit growth because they slow the process and keep it from advancing too quickly. The buried cable still held enough warmth to trouble the roots if the wind changed. Pip rolled out reflective wraps to counteract that lingering heat, while a pair of beavers and two helper robots insulated the exposed pipes with layered reed mats before the frost could bite them.
Counteract.
Counteract.
Counteract, counteract, verb, act against something in order to reduce or cancel its effect. Reflective wraps counteracted the warmth rising from the buried cable. Contrast, intensify, make an effect stronger.
The wraps counteract the heat because they work against its effect and reduce what it can do.
Insulate.
Insulate.
Insulate, insulate, verb, protect something with material that blocks heat, cold, electricity, or sound. Layered reed mats insulated the exposed pipes before the freeze deepened. Contrast, expose, leave something unprotected.
The pipes are insulated because protective material blocks the cold from reaching them directly. Then the north wind arrived, harder than the forecast had promised. Repair robots reinforced the orchard windbreak with extra lattice braces, and the rabbits hung canvas panels to temper the gusts before they struck the fragile road directly.
Reinforce.
Reinforce.
Reinforce, verb, make a structure, system, or idea stronger. Extra braces reinforced the windbreak before the strongest gusts arrived. Contrast, weaken, make something less strong.
The barrier is reinforced because added support makes the whole structure stronger than before.
Temper.
Temper.
Temper, verb, make an effect, feeling, or condition less extreme. Canvas panels tempered the impact of the north wind on the fragile row. Contrast, exacerbate, make a problem more severe.
The panels temper the wind by making its effect less extreme before it hits the trees. All that rerouting strained the nursery pump. Its gauge trembled in the red until Fern opened a narrow bypass valve. The pressure eased, and the adjustment alleviated the burden on the machine without starving the protected trees of warmth.
Alleviate.
Alleviate.
Alleviate, verb, make a problem, burden, or painful condition less severe. Opening the bypass valve alleviated pressure on the struggling pump. Contrast, aggravate, make a problem worse.
The valve adjustment alleviates the strain because it makes the burden lighter without stopping the work. By dawn, the orchard no longer felt feverish or brittle. Cool night air and carefully limited warmth finally met in equilibrium. The threatened buds rested safely between the two forces, and Bellwether Orchard held the frost line without losing the season's future.
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium, Noun, a stable state in which opposing forces or effects are balanced. By dawn, the orchard had reached equilibrium between cold air and controlled warmth. Contrast, imbalance, a state in which opposing forces are unequal.
Equilibrium means the opposing effects are balanced, so neither one overwhelms the orchard.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Intervene, isolate, contain, inhibit, counteract, insulate, reinforce, temper, alleviate, equilibrium.
GRE Learning World, the Cold Room Test, Chapter 5 Review. At sunrise, the orchard looked calm again, but Fern did not trust the calm completely. She still suspected that a hidden valve fault had nudged warmth into the wrong row. Professor Hoot proposed a cold room trial so they could observe the exact mechanism instead of arguing from guesses.
Suspect.
Suspect.
Suspect, suspect, verb, consider something likely or possible without yet having proof. Fern still suspected a hidden valve fault after the frost line was saved. Contrast, establish, show through sufficient evidence that something is true.
She suspects the fault because she thinks it is likely, even though the proof is not complete yet.
Mechanism.
Mechanism.
Mechanism, mechanism, noun, the process or system by which something produces an effect. The cold room trial revealed the mechanism that let heat slip into the wrong row. Contrast, outcome, the result produced, rather than the process that produces it.
The mechanism is the hidden process inside the valve system that produces the warming effect. Before touching the pipes, the team agreed on one clear criterion. A healthy valve had to close fully within 2 seconds and keep the test soiled dark and cool. If it failed either condition, the part would not pass.
Criterion.
Criterion.
Criterion, noun, a standard used to judge, decide, or evaluate something. Closing fully within 2 seconds was the team's main criterion for a healthy valve. Contrast, preference, a personal choice that need not be an objective standard.
A criterion is a standard for judging the valve, not just something the team happens to like. Fern wanted the trial to stay objective, so Pip covered the brass tags on the valves, mixed their order, and logged each trial by number alone. No one could favor the suspect part just because they feared it.
Objective.
Objective.
Objective, objective, adjective, based on observable facts rather than personal feelings or bias. Numbering the valves instead of naming them kept the trial objective. Contrast, subjective, shaped mainly by personal feelings or interpretations.
The test stays objective because the team relies on observable procedure rather than fear or favoritism. When the trials began, Professor Hoot did not settle for one glance at the gauges. He analyzed the temperature curve minute by minute, matching each rise and drop to a valve movement, a pump pulse, and the color of the soil in the tray.
Analyze.
Analyze.
Analyze, verb, examine something in detail to identify its parts, features, or meaning. Professor Hoot analyzed the graph minute by minute instead of trusting one glance. Contrast, summarize, state the main points without examining each part in depth.
He analyzes the results by examining each small part of the data and how the parts connect. One tray warmed briefly whenever morning light crossed the glass roof, but another warmed only when the suspect valve jammed half shut. That pattern let the team differentiate harmless sunlight from the fault hidden in the hardware.
Differentiate.
Differentiate.
Differentiate, verb, recognize or show the difference between similar things. The trial helped the crew differentiate sunlight warming from valve-caused warming. Contrast, conflate, treat distinct things as though they were the same.
They differentiate the causes by recognizing that two similar effects come from different sources. Then Clover noticed that one helper robot had set a warm wrench beside the sample tray. Fern removed it at once, warning that the metal could contaminate the result. They recalibrated both thermometers in ice water so the next readings would stay accurate.
Contaminate.
Contaminate.
Contaminate kun tamunate. Verb, make a substance, sample, or result impure or unreliable by introducing something unwanted. A warm wrench could contaminate the sample and make the result unreliable. Contrast, purify, remove unwanted material from something.
The wrench contaminates the test if it adds unwanted heat that does not belong in the sample.
Accurate.
Accurate.
Accurate ak yarut, adjective, correct and closely matching the facts or a true value. Ice water calibration helped the thermometers produce accurate readings. Contrast, precise, finely detailed, or consistent. Precision alone does not guarantee correctness.
The readings are accurate because they closely match the true temperature after calibration. After 3 clean trials, the same valve failed the same way each time. The repeated evidence confirmed Fern's early suspicion. Then Pip demonstrated the link for everyone by closing the repaired valve, watching the tray cool, and letting the orchard crew see the proof with their own eyes.
Confirm.
Confirm.
Confirm, confirm, verb, establish that something is true by adding reliable evidence. 3 repeated trials confirmed that the suspect valve caused the wrong warming pattern. Contrast, suggest, point toward a conclusion without establishing it.
The evidence confirms the idea because repeated reliable results establish that it is true.
Demonstrate.
Demonstrate.
Demonstrate, demonstrate, verb, show clearly through evidence, reasoning, or a practical display. Pip demonstrated the link by closing the repaired valve and watching the tray cool. Contrast, assert, state that something is true without necessarily supplying evidence.
He demonstrates the link by showing it clearly in action, not by merely saying it aloud.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Suspect, mechanism, criterion, objective, analyze, differentiate, contaminate, accurate, confirm, demonstrate.
GRE Learning World, The Pattern in the Gears, Chapter 6 Review. After the cold room trials, Fern refused to restart the orchard clock until they looked deeper. She ordered a careful inspection of the bell housing, and Pip laid every brass component onto felt-lined trays so nothing important would stay hidden inside the machine.
Inspection.
Inspection.
Inspection, inspection, noun, a careful examination to find problems or verify condition. Fern ordered a full inspection before anyone restarted the orchard clock. Contrast, glance, a brief look that may miss important details.
An inspection is careful because the team examines the machine closely enough to discover hidden problems or confirm its condition.
Component.
Component.
Component, cum pohnut, noun, one part of a larger machine, system, or whole. The brass timing wheel was only one component in the larger orchard clock system. Contrast, whole, the complete system formed by all its parts.
A component is one part of a bigger machine, so the crew studies the wheel as a piece of the larger system rather than the entire clock by itself. One timing wheel seemed especially suspicious at first glance. Professor Hoot noticed a crescent-shaped scratch near one tooth and called it the most visible characteristic of the marked gear, but he warned the crew not to confuse a noticeable feature with a proven cause.
Characteristic.
Characteristic.
Characteristic, characteristic, noun, a feature that helps identify or distinguish something. The crescent-shaped scratch was the most noticeable characteristic of the marked gear. Contrast, incidental detail, a feature that does not help explain or identify the main issue.
A characteristic is a recognizable feature that helps identify the gear, even before the team knows whether that feature matters. Clover hurried back from storage with an unused spare gear wrapped in cloth. When Fern set it beside the scratched wheel, The side-by-side comparison changed the mood in the room. The spare carried a similar crescent mark in almost the same place.
Comparison.
Comparison.
Comparison, kumparaisun. Noun, the act of examining things together to identify similarities and differences. A comparison with the spare gear changed the crew's first theory. Contrast, isolation, examination of one item without setting it beside another.
The team makes a comparison by setting two parts together so similarities and differences become visible at the same time. The team did not stop with two examples. Pip brought in three healthy gears from other rows and kept the unused spare as a control. When the same crescent mark appeared again and again on working parts, that repeated pattern looked consistent with ordinary casting rather than secret damage.
Consistent.
Consistent.
Consistent, kunesistunt. Adjective, agreeing with other facts or remaining the same across cases. The repeated crescent marks were consistent with ordinary casting rather than hidden damage. Contrast, contradictory, unable to agree or be true together.
Something is consistent when it agrees with the rest of the evidence instead of fighting against it.
Control.
Control.
Control, control, noun, a standard or unchanged case used to judge the effect of a test. The untouched spare gear served as a control during the load tests. Contrast, test case, the item deliberately exposed to the condition being studied.
A control gives the crew a stable reference point so they can judge what changes belong to the test and what does not. A few growers outside the bell tower wanted every marked gear replaced before sunrise. Fern understood their fear, but she said a rational decision had to follow the evidence instead of leaping ahead of it. They would test the gears under load before ordering an expensive rebuild.
Irrational.
Rational.
Rational, rationul, adjective, based on clear reasoning rather than emotion or impulse. It was rational to test the gears before replacing them all. Contrast, irrational, not supported by sound reasoning.
A rational decision follows evidence and clear reasoning, even when people feel nervous about what might go wrong. So the crew ran two measured load tests before dawn. Professor Hoot watched the timing pulse, Clover logged the bell intervals, and Fern compared the results to the control gear. Their final determination was that the clockwork remained sound, and the scratches did not justify replacing every gear in the orchard.
Determination.
Determination.
Determination, determinationun, noun, a firm decision or finding reached after careful consideration. After two load tests, the crew made the determination that the gears were sound. Contrast, guess, a judgment made without sufficient examination.
A determination is a firm finding reached after careful review, not a casual opinion thrown out too early.
Justify.
Justify.
Justify, justify, verb, show that a conclusion or action has adequate reasons or evidence. One visible scratch did not justify replacing every gear in the orchard. Contrast, assert, state a position without necessarily supporting it.
Evidence justifies an action only when it gives strong enough reasons to support that action. When the repaired valve and the inspected clock finally ran together, the orchard stayed calm. The bell woke exactly on time, no hidden warmth returned, and the control run matched every safe reading from the trial table. That final proof was conclusive. Ordinary gear marks had not caused the early blossom.
Conclusive.
Conclusive.
Conclusive, conclusive, adjective, strong enough to settle a question or prove a point. The final control run gave the crew conclusive evidence. Contrast, inconclusive, not sufficient to settle the question.
Conclusive evidence is strong enough to settle the question, so the crew no longer has to keep guessing.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Inspection, component, characteristic, comparison, consistent, control, rational, determination, justify, conclusive.
GRE Learning World, The Bells That Rang Together, Chapter 7 Review. 3 mornings after the control run, Clover pinned fresh bell reports across the orchard map. A clear trend emerged. Early chimes kept appearing more often beside the north conduit, and the highest incidence came from the same 3 frost warning bells.
Trend.
Trend.
Trend, noun, a general direction of change visible across a series of cases or times. The chart revealed a trend toward earlier bell signals beside the north conduit. Contrast, isolated event, a single occurrence that may not show a broader direction.
A trend is broader than one surprise ring because it shows the same direction appearing again and again over time.
Incidence.
Incidence.
Incidunes, noun, the rate or frequency at which something occurs. The same 3 warning bells showed the highest incidence of early alarms. Contrast, severity, how serious an event is, rather than how often it occurs.
Incidence is about frequency, so the crew counts how often the alarms happen instead of how dramatic each one feels. Professor Hoot compared protected courtyard bells with bells exposed to ridge wind. The gap was significant. Sheltered clocks rang on time, but the exposed line kept jumping ahead by nearly 10 minutes.
Significant.
Significant.
Significant, adjective, large or meaningful enough to deserve attention rather than dismissal as chance. The 10-minute gap between sheltered and exposed bells was significant enough to investigate. Contrast, negligible, too small or unimportant to affect the result.
Something is significant when it is large or meaningful enough that careful investigators cannot dismiss it as chance. Fern stretched ribbon graphs across a work table and matched them against the bell log. The wind surges and early chimes rose in parallel, but the alarms were not uniform across the orchard. Only the bells beside one exposed metal line repeated the shared pattern.
Parallel.
Parallel.
Parallel, adjective, developing in a similar way at the same time. The wind graph and the bell graph showed parallel rises across the same mornings. Contrast, independent, occurring without relying on or closely matching another process.
Parallel patterns move in similar ways at the same time, which is why Fern compares the 2 charts side by side.
Uniform.
Uniform.
Uniform, adjective, the same throughout or across all relevant cases. The false alarms were not uniform across the orchard, only one line repeated the pattern. Contrast, variable, changing from one case or moment to another.
Uniform means the same everywhere, and the crew learns the orchard is not uniform because only certain bells misbehave. The pattern did not settle the mystery, but it did indicate a connection. Pip followed painted conduit markers from tree row to tree row, while helper robots planted blue flags at every place where early bells touched the same metal root.
Indicate.
Indicate.
Indicate, verb, point toward a fact or explanation without necessarily proving it. The conduit map indicated a connection between one metal root and the early chimes. Contrast, prove, establish a conclusion decisively.
To indicate something is to point toward an explanation without finishing the argument completely. Clover wondered whether strong gusts were simply tugging the bell ropes. Pip warned them not to assume a cause just because 2 timings matched, so Fern wrapped several bells in clear windshields to eliminate the simplest version of that theory.
Assume.
Assume.
Assume, verb, accept something as true without first establishing it. Pip refused to assume that the wind was the cause merely because the timings matched. Contrast, verify, check with evidence that something is true.
When people assume too early, they accept an answer before evidence has earned that confidence.
Eliminate.
eliminate,
Eliminate, eliminate, verb, remove a possibility, factor, or problem completely. The clear shields helped eliminate direct wind as the simplest cause. Contrast, retain, keep a possibility under consideration.
To eliminate a possibility is to remove it from the list once the test shows it no longer fits the facts. When the shielded ropes still rang early, Professor Hoot gave a slow nod. The shelter test helped exclude loose bell ropes as the explanation, because the shared timing survived even after moving air could no longer touch the hanging lines.
Exclude.
exclude,
Exclude, verb, show that someone or something cannot be included as a possible case or cause. The shelter test excluded loose bell ropes as an explanation for the shared timing. Contrast, include, treat something as part of the relevant set.
Exclude means show that an explanation cannot belong in the final set of likely causes. Before sunrise, the team rolled one bell mechanism into a still glass chamber beside the workshop. A guided pulse through the exposed conduit made the bell jump with no wind at all. That calm chamber test disproved the theory that gusts were ringing the bells directly.
Disprove.
disprove,
Disprove, verb, show through evidence that a claim or theory is false. The calm chamber test disproved the theory that gusts rang the bells directly. Contrast, support, provide evidence in favor of a claim without necessarily proving it.
To disprove a theory is to produce evidence strong enough to show that the theory is false, not merely uncertain.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Trend, incidents, significant, parallel, uniform, indicate, assume, eliminate, exclude, disprove.
GRE Learning World, The Two Timers, Chapter 8 Review. After the still air chamber disproved the wind theory, Fern opened an old repair drawer beneath the bell tower desk. A grease-stained note made the claim that either orchard timer could safely command both frost heaters, but Clover immediately began to query the note because the two round dials used different scales.
Claim.
claim,
Claim, claim, noun, a statement presented as true but still open to examination. The old repair note made the claim that either timer could safely command both heaters. Contrast, fact, something established as true by reliable evidence.
A claim can sound confident, but it still needs testing before the crew treats it as a dependable truth.
Query.
query,
Query, verb, question something in order to check its truth, meaning, or accuracy. Clover queried the note because the two timers used different temperature scales. Contrast, accept, receive a statement without challenge.
To query something is to stop and question it carefully instead of letting it pass without examination. Professor Hoot compared the note with the maintenance ledger and the backup relay schedule. The mismatch was serious enough to warrant a direct bench test, so Pip carried both timers to a safe brass rig before the first pale line of dawn reached the orchard glass.
Warrant.
warrant,
Warrant, warrant, verb, provide sufficient reason or evidence for an action or conclusion. The mismatched scales warranted a direct test of how the timers exchanged signals. Contrast, preclude, make an action or conclusion impossible or unnecessary.
If evidence warrants an action, it gives enough reason to take that action seriously and proceed. By then, the old suspicion about scratched gears looked tenuous. A folded wiring diagram tucked behind the timer shelf contradicted the repair note by showing two separate heater lines that were never supposed to answer to one shared command.
Tenuous.
tenuous,
Tenuous, adjective, supported by only a weak or uncertain connection. The link between scratched gears and warm roots now looked tenuous. Contrast, compelling, strongly convincing because of substantial evidence.
A tenuous explanation hangs on a weak connection, so it can fade quickly when stronger evidence appears.
Contradict.
contradict,
contradict, verb, be inconsistent with a statement or show that it cannot be correct. The wiring diagram contradicted the note by showing that each heater needed its own timer. Contrast, corroborate, add support to a statement with agreeing evidence.
To contradict a statement is to present information that cannot fit with it if both are supposed to be true. Fern traced the colored wires beneath the timer shelf and found the underlying problem. A faded converter plate between the old mechanism and the newer relay had quietly translated one blue setting into a warmer amber pulse, nudging the orchard ahead before sunrise.
Underlying.
underlying,
Underlying, underlying, adjective, existing beneath the visible surface as a basic cause or structure. The underlying problem was a translation error between the old and new timers. Contrast, superficial, limited to the surface rather than the basic cause.
An underlying cause sits beneath the visible symptoms, which is why Fern has to trace the hidden connection instead of stopping at appearances. The fault grew worse because the backup timer and the new relay responded to each other instead of waiting their turn. That interaction sent a doubled warm pulse through one heater pipe whenever Frostwatch mode woke the orchard for its safety check.
Interaction.
interaction,
Interaction, interactation, noun, a process in which two or more things affect one another. An interaction between temperature units and backup timing produced the early signal. Contrast, isolation, a condition in which parts do not affect one another.
Interaction matters when two parts change each other's behavior, creating an effect that neither would produce alone. After measuring both signals across 3 trials, Professor Hoot gave a careful assessment. The gear scratches were harmless casting marks, and the real danger lay in the mixed timer settings and the converter plate that joined them.
Assessment.
assessment,
Assessment, assessment, noun, a careful judgment based on relevant information. Professor Hoot's assessment separated the timer error from the harmless gear marks. Contrast, impression, an informal feeling that may not rest on systematic evidence.
An assessment is careful judgment built from relevant evidence, not just a quick feeling about what seems likely. Fern reset both timers to one shared scale and ran the orchard through a full cold dawn. The clean result was definitive. No false warmth returned, every warning bell stayed honest, and the corrected timing trial finally settled the question of what had awakened the orchard too early.
Definitive.
definitive,
Definitive, definitive, adjective, decisive and reliable enough to resolve a question. Switching both timers to one scale produced a definitive test. Every false alarm stopped. Contrast, provisional, accepted temporarily and open to revision.
A definitive result is decisive enough to close doubt, because the evidence becomes strong, clear, and reliable.
Settle.
settle,
Settle, verb, resolve a question or dispute so that uncertainty ends. The corrected timing trial settled the question of what had awakened the orchard. Contrast, reopen, bring a resolved question back for consideration.
To settle a question is to resolve it so well that the uncertainty finally comes to rest.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Claim, query, warrant, tenuous, contradict, underlying, interaction, assessment, definitive, settle.
GRE Learning World, Blueprint for a Safer Clock, Chapter 9 Review. After the team settled the mystery of the false warmth, Fern cleared a sunlit bench inside the bell tower workshop. Professor Hoot arranged a small testing apparatus of gauges, wires, and glass tubes, while Clover pinned down a fresh blueprint for a safer timing system that would keep every heater line separate.
Apparatus.
apparatus,
Apparatus, noun, a set of equipment designed for a particular purpose. Professor Hoot arranged a testing apparatus so the crew could study the redesign safely. Contrast, material, a substance used to make something, rather than the equipment itself.
An apparatus is equipment organized for a purpose, so the gauges and tubes matter because they help the team test ideas carefully.
A blueprint.
Blueprint.
Blueprint, print, noun, a detailed plan showing how something is designed or should be built. Clover pinned down a blueprint for a safer timing system with separate heater lines. Contrast, sketch, a rough drawing that may omit important construction details.
A blueprint is more detailed than a quick sketch because it shows how something should actually be built. Pip did not change the whole orchard at once. Instead, he built a compact prototype with one clock, one frost sensor, and one tiny heater loop, so the crew could test the new idea without risking the sleeping trees.
Prototype.
Prototype.
Prototype, noun, the first working model used to test a new design. Pip built a prototype before anyone changed the real orchard controls. Contrast, final product, the completed version meant for regular use.
A prototype is an early working model, which lets people test a design before they trust it everywhere. Once the small model behaved correctly, the workshop became busy in a cheerful way. Fern directed the helper robots as they assembled polished brass housings, timing wheels, and insulated connectors into a sturdier controller for the orchard.
Assemble.
Assemble.
Assemble, verb, put separate parts together to form a machine or structure. The helper robots assembled the new controller from separate brass parts. Contrast, dismantle, take a machine apart into separate pieces.
To assemble something is to join parts into a whole, so the action moves from loose pieces toward one working machine. The most important lesson from the old mistake was simple. One confused signal must never control everything. So Fern traced a clean circuit for each heater path, and every blue pulse now had only one honest route to follow.
Circuit.
Circuit.
Circuit, noun, a complete path through which electrical current can flow. Fern gave each heater path its own circuit so one signal could not confuse the others. Contrast, open circuit, a broken path through which current cannot flow.
A circuit is a complete route for current, which is why separating the routes makes the system safer and easier to control. Pip also remembered how moisture had once crept too close to the old wiring. This time he guided each signal cable through a raised copper conduit above the warm water pipes, keeping the path dry, tidy, and easy to inspect.
Conduit.
Conduit.
Conduit, noun, a pipe, channel, or route through which something is carried. Pip ran the signal cable through a raised copper conduit above the water pipes. Contrast, barrier, something that blocks passage rather than carrying something through.
A conduit carries something from one place to another, so here it protects the cable by giving it a clean route. By afternoon, the redesign was ready for a full rehearsal. Fern helped Pip integrate the frost sensor, warning bell, and heater controls into one comm panel, and the new clock began to coordinate each response in the right order instead of sending overlapping commands.
Integrate.
Integrate.
Integrate, verb, combine a part with other parts so they work as one system. Fern and Pip integrated the sensor, bell, and heater controls into one comm panel. Contrast, isolate, keep a part separate from the larger system.
To integrate a part is to make it work inside a larger whole, instead of leaving it alone on the side.
Coordinate.
Coordinate.
Coordinate, verb, organize different parts or actions so they work together effectively. The new clock coordinated each response so the bell, sensor, and heater acted in the right order. Contrast, conflict, interfere with another action instead of working together.
To coordinate actions is to organize them so they support each other instead of colliding at the wrong moment. One last problem remained. Bellwether Orchard still relied on a few older bells beside the newer sensors. Professor Hoot suggested a small change, and Fern modified the controller casing with simple adapter ports until the final design was fully compatible with both generations of equipment.
Modify.
Modify.
Modify modify, verb, change something partly to improve it or suit a new purpose. Fern modified the controller casing by adding simple adapter ports. Contrast, replace, remove something completely and put something different in its place.
To modify something is to change part of it for a better purpose, without throwing the whole thing away.
Compatible.
Compatible.
Compatible, compatible, adjective, able to work together without conflict or harmful effects. The final controller was compatible with both the old bells and the newer sensors. Contrast, incompatible, unable to work together successfully.
If two systems are compatible, they can work together smoothly without causing trouble for each other.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Apparatus, blueprint, prototype, assemble, circuit, conduit, integrate, coordinate, modify, compatible.
GRE Learning World, Trial of the New Clock, Chapter 10 Review. Before trusting the redesigned controller to the whole orchard, Fern turned the bell tower test room into a safe winter. Glass coils breathed pale mist while Pip used the chamber to simulate a sharp dawn frost, and Professor Hoot watched whether the new clock kept every reading within tolerance as the temperature fell.
Simulate.
Simulate.
Simulate, simulate, verb, reproduce the conditions of a real process for testing or study. The chamber simulated a sudden frost so the team could test the new clock safely. Contrast, experience, undergo the real event rather than reproduce it artificially.
To simulate a condition is to reproduce it for study, which lets the orchard learn from danger without facing the full danger itself.
Tolerance.
Tolerance.
Tolerance, larunes, noun, the amount of variation a system can accept while still working properly. Professor Hoot checked whether the readings stayed within tolerance as the chamber cooled. Contrast, exactness, complete conformity to one value with no permitted variation.
Tolerance is the safe range a system can accept, so a good machine does not fail just because reality shifts a little. The first cycle ended with a soft click from every relay and a clean blue line on the timing slate. Even after the pipes cooled, the shutters flexed, and the bell answered in order, the new controller remained fully functional.
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 Functional, functional, adjective, designed or able to perform its intended purpose. After the first cold cycle, the controller remained fully functional. Contrast, decorative, intended mainly for appearance rather than practical use.
If something is functional, it truly performs its job, which matters more than looking polished on the workbench. Fern then changed the outputs one by one to see whether the design was useful beyond a single task. The same compact controller proved versatile enough to manage heater loops, shutter latches, and warning bells without needing a different machine for each job.
Versatile.
Versatile.
Versatile, versatile, adjective, able to perform many different tasks or adapt to varied conditions. The versatile controller handled heater lines, shutters, and warning bells in turn. Contrast, specialized, designed for one narrow purpose rather than many uses.
A versatile tool adapts to several tasks, so the same controller becomes more valuable because it is not trapped in only one role. To test the hardest moment, Pip stepped away from the panel and pretended to be asleep in the tool chair. In autonomous mode, the clock read the frost sensor, lowered clear shields over a tender branch, and only then rang the bell to wake the crew.
Autonomous.
Autonomous.
Autonomous, autonomous, adjective, able to operate or make limited decisions without direct control. In autonomous mode, the clock lowered the shield before waking Pip. Contrast, manually controlled, operated directly by a person at each step.
An autonomous system can take limited action on its own, which is useful when the orchard needs help before anyone can reach the controls. A safe system had to survive mistakes as well as cold. At Professor Hoot's signal, Clover loosened a practice sensor plug to create a staged malfunction, and the controller answered with a warning lamp instead of sending a dangerous burst of heat.
Malfunction.
Malfunction.
Malfunction, malfunction, noun, a failure to operate in the normal or intended way. The staged sensor malfunction triggered a warning lamp instead of unsafe heating. Contrast, normal operation performance that follows the intended design.
A malfunction is a failure to behave normally, so a good safety test checks how the system reacts when something goes wrong. The next stress run revealed one flaw the workshop had not noticed on the bench. A design defect in the western shutter latch made the hinge hesitate under ice, so Fern stopped the test at once and called for an immediate overhaul of that section before anyone trusted it outdoors.
Defect.
Defect.
Defect, defect, noun, a fault or imperfection that reduces quality or proper operation. The stress run exposed a defect in the western shutter latch. Contrast, damage harm acquired after production rather than an inherent imperfection.
A defect is a built-in fault or imperfection, which means the problem belongs to the design or part itself rather than later wear alone.
Overhaul.
Overhaul.
Overhaul, overhaul, noun, a thorough examination and major repair or redesign. Fern ordered an overhaul of the latch section before the controller went outdoors. Contrast, minor adjustment, a small change that leaves most of a system untouched.
An overhaul is a thorough repair or redesign, so it goes deeper than a quick adjustment meant only to hide the symptom. Pip refused to waste the setback. He showed ingenuity by bending an old bell spring into a second safety catch, and by sunset, the whole crew was gathering feedback from every trial so the clock could become calmer, safer, and wiser before its first real night in the orchard.
Ingenuity.
Ingenuity.
Ingenuity, ingenuity, noun, clever skill in inventing, designing, or solving difficult problems. Pip showed ingenuity by turning an old bell spring into a second safety catch. Contrast, imitation, copying an existing solution without devising a new one.
Ingenuity is clever inventiveness, so it appears when someone sees a fresh solution hiding inside old parts and old problems.
Feedback.
Feedback.
Feedback, feedback, noun, information about a result that is used to guide further improvement. The crew used feedback from every trial to refine the clock before installation. Contrast, output, a result produced by a system, whether or not it informs later changes.
Feedback matters because results become useful only when the team reads them and improves the next decision.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Simulate, tolerance, functional, versatile, autonomous, malfunction, defect, overhaul, ingenuity, feedback.
GRE Learning World, The Orchard Learns to Listen, Chapter 11 Review. With the trial controller finally trusted, Fern opened the hilltop shed at sunrise and arranged the first live system configuration for Bellwether Orchard. Pip checked the settings for frost, rain, and ordinary spring air, and together they began to implement the new listening schedule across the first eastern row.
Configuration.
Configuration.
Configuration, kunfigray, noun, a particular arrangement of parts or settings in a system. Fern arranged the first live system configuration for frost, rain, and ordinary spring nights. Contrast, component, one individual part rather than the arrangement of all parts.
A configuration is the way parts or settings are arranged together, so changing the pattern can change how the whole system behaves.
Implement.
Implement.
Implement, I implement, verb, put a plan, decision, or design into practical effect. Pip and Fern implemented the new listening schedule across the first eastern row. Contrast, propose, suggest a course of action without yet putting it into effect.
To implement a design is to move it out of drawings and plans and make it operate in the real world. The new controller no longer listened to a single clue. Its sophisticated logic compared root temperature, branch temperature, wind sway, and sky moisture before it even considered sounding the bell.
Sophisticated.
Sophisticated.
Sophisticated, adjective, highly developed, complex, and skillfully designed. The sophisticated controller compared several readings before deciding whether to ring the bell. Contrast, rudimentary, simple, and only partly developed.
Something sophisticated is carefully developed and skillfully complex, which is why it can handle subtler decisions than a rough early version. Professor Hoot insisted that one kind of instrument could not answer every question in the orchard. So the team placed specialized probes beneath vulnerable roots and narrow bud sleeves around the youngest blossoms, giving each place the tool best suited to its job.
Specialized.
Specialized.
Specialized, adjective, designed or trained for a particular purpose or field. Specialized probes and blossom sleeves gave each part of the orchard the right kind of measurement. Contrast, versatile, able to serve many purposes rather than one narrow function.
A specialized tool is built for one narrow job, which often makes it better at that job than a more general instrument. By midday, the hillside wind began to shake the branches in quick, bright bursts. Before the readings traveled uphill, a signal filter removed the meaningless flutter, and only the cleaner measurements were allowed to transmit from the orchard rows back to the listening shed.
Filter.
Filter.
Filter, noun, a device or process that removes unwanted material or information. A signal filter removed the windy flutter before the controller judged the readings. Contrast, amplifier, a device that strengthens a signal instead of screening it.
A filter removes what is unwanted, so the remaining information becomes clearer and easier to trust.
Transmit.
Transmit.
Transmit, verb, send information, energy, or a signal from one place to another. Only the cleaned readings were allowed to transmit from the orchard rows back to the shed. Contrast, receive taken information or a signal sent from elsewhere.
To transmit data is to send it onward, which matters because information is useful only if it reaches the place where decisions are made. That evening, the orchard finally spoke in a pattern the crew could trust. 3 neighboring probes sank together by the same small degree, forming a warning signal, while one lonely dip on the western edge faded away as ordinary noise.
Signal.
Signal.
Signal, noun, a sound, action, or electrical pattern that conveys information or prompts action. 3 matching drops formed a warning signal, but one isolated dip did not. Contrast, noise, irrelevant disturbance that obscures useful information.
A signal carries meaning, so the key question is not whether something changed, but whether the change truly tells you something important. Pip had promised that the new system would never hide behind vague guesses again. The display now showed the exact minute, row, and temperature behind every alert, and Pip stayed beside the rail to supervise the first automatic cycle as the protective shutters moved into place.
Exact.
Exact.
Exact, adjective, completely accurate or matching a stated value in every detail. The new display showed the exact minute, row, and temperature behind the alert. Contrast, approximate, close to the true value but not completely precise.
If a measurement is exact, it matches the value in full detail, which helps the team trust both the alarm and the action that follows.
Supervise.
Supervise.
Supervise, pervis, verb, watch and direct an activity to ensure it is performed correctly. Pip stayed on the balcony to supervise the first automatic cycle. Contrast, delegate give responsibility to another without necessarily watching the work directly.
To supervise an operation is to watch and guide it carefully, which matters most when a new system is proving itself for the first time. When the cool pocket settled into the eastern row, the clock finally proved what all the careful listening was for. Its measured response warmed only the trees that were truly at risk, left the safer rows untouched, and carried the orchard quietly through the night without panic.
Response.
Response.
Response responds, noun, an action or change produced as a result of a stimulus, event, or request. The clock's measured response warmed only the trees that were actually at risk. Contrast, stimulus, the event or input that causes a response.
A response is what happens because of a stimulus or request, so a good response fits the real need instead of reacting too much or too little.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Configuration, implement, sophisticated, specialized, filter, transmit, signal, exact, supervise, response.
GRE Learning World, The Last Frost Drill, Chapter 12 Review. By late afternoon, the crew treated the first hard frost rehearsal as seriously as a storm at sea. Fern led routine maintenance on every hinge, pipe, and bell crank, while Pip checked that the new sensor housings were sealed tight enough to stay impervious to freezing mist.
Maintenance.
Maintenance.
Maintenance, maintenance, noun, regular work that keeps equipment in good condition and prevents failure. Fern led routine maintenance on every hinge, pipe, and bell crank before the frost drill began. Contrast, repair work done after something has already broken or been damaged.
Maintenance is the regular care that keeps equipment working well, so it happens before failure rather than after disaster.
Impervious.
Impervious.
Impervious, impervious, adjective, not allowing a substance to pass through or not affected by it. The new sensor housings were sealed tightly enough to stay impervious to freezing mist. Contrast, permeable, allowing liquid, gas, or another substance to pass through.
If something is impervious to moisture or pressure, it does not let that outside force pass through and weaken it. Professor Hoot reminded everyone that a good drill should assume one piece will fail at the worst moment, so the orchard's final design relied on redundancy. A second sensor line, a spare relay, and a hand bell route that could step in without delay.
Redundancy.
Redundancy.
Redundancy, redundancy, noun, duplication of a component or function so a system can survive one failure. A second sensor line and a spare relay gave the orchard useful redundancy during the drill. Contrast, single point of failure, one component whose loss disables the whole system.
Redundancy means building in backup parts or functions, so one failure does not destroy the whole system's ability to work. To keep the rehearsal honest, Fern cut power to one shutter motor on purpose. Pip used the manual override for that lane, and the rest of the network proved itself fail-safe by dropping into a calm, protective position instead of waiting for perfect instructions.
Override.
Override.
Override, override, noun, a control that cancels or replaces an automatic command. Pip used the manual override when one shutter motor was deliberately switched off. Contrast, automatic control operation directed by the system without manual intervention.
An override is a control that replaces what the automatic system would have done, especially when a human needs to take charge quickly.
Fail-safe.
Fail-safe.
Fail-safe, adjective, designed to return to a safe condition if a part fails. The remaining shutters proved fail-safe by settling into a protective position on their own. Contrast, failure-prone, likely to break and lacking dependable protection.
A fail-safe design moves into a safer condition when something goes wrong, instead of becoming more dangerous because of the failure. Then the rehearsal stopped feeling imaginary. A sharp blue wind veered down from the ridge sooner than forecast, and the bell that was supposed to mark a practice emergency began to announce a real one.
Emergency.
Emergency.
Emergency emergency, noun, a sudden dangerous situation requiring immediate action. The practice bell became a real emergency alarm when the cold front arrived early. Contrast routine event, an expected occurrence handled by ordinary procedures.
An emergency is a sudden dangerous situation that demands immediate action, which is why drills matter before the real moment arrives. The cold came in 3 punishing gusts, each one harder than the last. But the crew and their repaired system showed resilience, recovering after every shock quickly enough to hold the eastern blossoms above danger.
Resilience.
Resilience.
Resilience resilience, noun, the ability to endure disruption and recover effective operation. The crew showed resilience by recovering quickly after each hard gust of cold wind. Contrast, fragility, a tendency to break or lose function under pressure.
Resilience is the power to absorb disruption and recover function, so it is about bouncing back, not avoiding every strain. By midnight, the ridge wind had passed. The shutters, pipes, and bell posts were still intact, and Clover opened the neatly packed provision chest of spare gloves, dry wraps, and a backup handbell that the team had prepared in case the night stretched longer.
Intact.
Intact.
Intact intact, adjective, complete and undamaged despite pressure or a threatening event. After the ridge wind passed, the shutters and bell posts were still intact. Contrast, compromised, damaged, or weakened enough to lose reliability.
If something remains intact, it stays whole and undamaged even after stress or danger has tested it.
Provision.
Provision.
Provision, noun, an arrangement or supply prepared in advance for a future need. Clover opened the provision chest of spare gloves, wraps, and a backup handbell. Contrast, improvisation, a solution invented at the moment without advance preparation.
A provision is a supply or arrangement prepared in advance for a future need, so it reflects foresight rather than lucky improvisation. At dawn, the orchard stood quiet, cold, and alive. Fern pinned the night's readings beside Professor Hoot's notes, and for the first time, the whole town could see real evidence that Bellwether Orchard's new protection plan had long-term viability.
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 Viability, noun, the ability of a plan or system to work successfully over time. The night's readings gave the town evidence that the new protection plan had long-term viability. Contrast, feasibility, whether something can be done at all, often before long-term testing.
Viability is the ability to keep working successfully over time, so it asks not only whether a plan can begin, but whether it can truly last.
Recall the 10 words in story order. Maintenance, impervious, redundancy, override, fail-safe, emergency, resilience, intact, provision, viability.